Hey, Margie here. So many of us have some underlying issues that we're dealing with, whether it's fatigue, whether it's hair loss. But the root cause can be toxins, and oftentimes these aren't looked at. But today, we're going to evaluate this from the perspective of a functional medicine gynecologist. And our special guest is Dr. Wendie Trubow. And Dr. Trubow received her MD degree from Tufts University in 2000 and has been practicing functional medicine since 2009. After all these years, she is still passionate about helping women optimize their health and their lives. And she believes that there's so many different challenges in a woman's life: work, home, relationships, spirituality, health, and they all matter. Her personal struggles with mold and metal toxicity, celiac disease, inspired her to co-author with her husband a recently released book, Dirty Girl: Ditch the Toxins, Look Great, and Feel Freaking Amazing. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to look at common toxins that affect our bones and overall health and where to start cleansing ourselves from them. So stay tuned. Welcome, Dr. Trubow. I'm really, really happy to have you here on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You know, this topic is so important because oftentimes people just don't think about the role that toxins play in their bones and overall health. But how did you get so involved in toxins that it
Mhm.
really motivated you to even write this amazing book? So how did that happen?
So I've been doing functional medicine for years and dabbled in toxins, but always felt like it was too hard or too something. And so I don't know why. I had a breakthrough a couple of years ago and just decided that it was a tremendous area of my practice that I wasn't addressing, and it was everywhere. So my partner, who's also my husband, who's also the co-author of the book, had a couple of patients who had total hair loss, like head to toe, had no hair on their body. And I got to watch as they grew their hair back. And that really opened me up to thinking, oh my God, what a difference this makes. And then back in, I kind of had a sense that I had mycotoxins, and I did the test right before I went to France and London with my family in must have been 2019, because it was a year before the pandemic. And I did this test, and then I didn't have it till I came back. But in France, we were slogging through, so dusty. And it turns out it was like 7 days after Notre Dame burned down. And I said to my husband, so dusty here. And we were like, yeah, what's the problem? And fast forward about 3 to 4 months later, and I had all of a sudden gained 9 pounds, and my hair was falling out in droves. Like, I was like, oh my God. And out on NPR comes this report that the burning of Notre Dame released about 500 tons of lead into the air. And I looked at my husband, I said, I think I got enough lead in France to sort of tip me over the edge, because I was mildly positive before and had disregarded the results because I said, oh, I'm like 1 point over positive. And then I did it and I was 4 points over positive, which really was treatment worthy given the symptoms I was having. And I looked at my husband, I said, I am such a dirty girl. And that was really the advent of that moment where we said, oh, we need to get rid of these toxins, A, because they're harming me, and B, because the backstory to even that is that I don't eat gluten, I don't eat cow's dairy, I don't eat sugar, I don't eat processed carbs, I don't drink alcohol, I don't do anything fun around food. I'm really boring. And I'm like the poster child for healthy living. And if I have these toxins, what does everyone else have who's maybe not as conscious of them? So that really opened my eyes and set us on this path of, oh, I'm going to get rid of the toxins in myself, and we're going to look for ways to bring this to the world so that people can get the message and get healthy.
Wow, I love that. And it's so important and so often overlooked. It's one of the last things that people even think about when it comes to really their overall health, or that could be a root cause of symptoms. So before we get into that, because we'll get into all sorts of things, but why don't you just share what are examples that people every day are consuming that they don't even know about?
Okay, Margie. So the first thing I'll say is I am the bad news bear, and there's hope. So it's sort of this dichotomy. So anything that comes from a package is contaminated with glyphosate. they've shown that even organic grains can be contaminated with glyphosate, which is an herbicide that's used throughout the world and is cancer promoting. It lives in the bones. And so that's one thing that people are eating that they might not even think about. Another thing that people might not think about, or is this only food or is this life?
No, just in general, just some of the examples that people, I know that could be a whole hour, but some of the top ones that we're confronted with on a regular basis that we're not even aware of.
Okay, so food is huge, non-organic food that's contaminated with herbicides, pesticides, and then the furniture we're sitting on, most particularly the beds we lie on, are often treated with a flame retardant, and those are endocrine disruptors. And so that's a huge source of toxins for people, because you don't even think about, oh, my bed was treated. But unless it's an organic mattress that has certifications, it's been treated. And then our body products, a lot of them contain byproducts that are also endocrine disruptors, potential cancer promoting agents, and they're not in our favor. So, and then I would also say construction. So if you live in a house that was built before 1978, it may have lead paint in the walls. And as the house settles, that lead gets released and you absorb it, you walk on it, you can breathe it in, you eat it. And that is a heavy metal. It's very hard for some people to remove from their bodies.
Let's talk about lead for a minute, because we're also concerned with bones on this podcast. And,
yes,
there's a real relationship with lead toxicity and, lead stored in the bones. So why don't you just share a little bit about lead in the bones?
Sure. So let's back up a step. So I would say people fall into two broad categories: really good detoxers or people like me who are not good detoxers. And what happens when you're not the best detoxer is when you get exposed to any kind of toxin, including lead or mercury from fish and fillings or any other toxin that we can refer to, your body often can't get rid of it as fast as you're getting exposed to it. And so your body, being smart, says, well, if this is in the bloodstream, it's going to make me sick. So I'm going to put it somewhere. And for lead, that storage depot is the bones. And so whenever women come in and say, oh yeah, I was told I had low bone mass, or I have osteoporosis or osteopenia, my first comment is, let's get you checked for heavy metals, because that's where it shows up for women.
And what do you see?
Oh, metal, yeah, yes, positive. It's also, I think, particularly for women who are 60 and up, the generation of women who grew up then were exposed, it was a lot less regulated, and women were exposed to things not even knowing. And so that's one way you get exposed. And another way is people who are younger, whose mothers breastfed them. If they had lead, the breast milk releases it, and women can get exposed to heavy metals that way. So it's, I do recommend you nurse, and it's just something to keep in mind.
It's really interesting because you could be exposed to lead as a child, like many, many years ago. It doesn't have to be a recent exposure, and it's still stored in the bone. So
Correct.
yeah. So what's your recommendation with testing then?
I always recommend, I think that knowledge is power. I also think ignorance is bliss. So you have to figure out where you are on that spectrum. But if you feel like, okay, I'm ready to address this, then we do urine testing in our practice. There is hair testing. I don't love it because the hair grows slowly. And so you're only showing what your body's able to start getting rid of, and not necessarily what you're storing. That can be a much greater well. So we do provoked urine testing, and you'll definitely need to work with a functional medicine provider to get that done. But it's a urine test. You do it at home. You collect your urine, we send it in. It takes like a week to come back, and you see your levels. And what I would say and caution people is the first number you get it's usually often not the number that's real, because if you're someone who stores metals, then you don't have great detox. And think of it like a spigot that's rusted shut. You can't really show what's there until you start improving the detox mechanisms. And then the floodgates open and you go, oh my God, this is ridiculous. I never knew. So the numbers often go much higher. So we treat at positive, as opposed to me, who said, well, I'm 1 point over positive, I'll just watch it. That was a mistake.
So anything you're saying over positive, you treat.
Treat. Absolutely.
And then how long is the treatment?
Well, it depends if you're someone like me who's loyal to my toxins. Apparently, I don't want to let them go. So it can take anywhere from 3 months. And keep in mind, Margie, it's how intense are you doing the treatment? Are you doing IVs in addition to it? Do you have all the augment things like a sauna or in Epsom salt baths? Are you doing other things that support detox? Do you do dry brushing? How often do you exercise? All those things go into it. So it can take anywhere from 3 months to 3 years. And it really depends how high your levels are and how loyal you are to them.
But the good news, let's tell them the silver lining. The good news is once you do it, what do you see with your patients now that you've really implemented this on a big level?
You can see, well, it's head to toe. So I know women are concerned about their bones, and watching your bones grow is like watching your hair grow, right? It's sort of this slow process that's not as satisfying. So you really have to look over time. But what it does is it gives you the opportunity to start building bone because it's now not being occupied with lead. So it's important to watch your diet and make sure you don't have food sensitivities, and take your calcium and your D and your magnesium and do weight bearing exercise. But now you can actually make a difference in it. So that's on the bones. And then the other things that happen are really head to toe. So I grew my hair back. Other women have grown their hair back. I didn't lose all my hair, but I lost about half the hair on my head. And now it's in various stages of growing back, which drives me nuts, but it's growing back. Weight loss, you can have gut health improve. You can have skin improve because a lot of weird skin things track back to toxins. And so it's everywhere. It's sort of head to toe.
Wow. So important. And as we said, often overlooked. So about your own detoxification journey, any advice? So people listening and they're thinking, that might be me. Like, where do they begin and not get into overwhelm, as you said?
Such a great question. So it's so funny. I was talking to my daughter about this last night. I have teenagers. I have 4 kids and 2 are teenagers. And my second daughter is really into makeup. And my first daughter is really into dance competitions. And the makeup that she needs for dance competitions is not clean. It's not clean. And so what I was talking to my second daughter last night about was, as you start to run out of things, let's level up. So the first thing I would say to people is, Rome wasn't built in a day, and your health is not going to either. So take it one step at a time and do things that feel manageable for you. Meaning, if food's the lowest hanging fruit to tackle, do that. And as you start to run out of beauty products, transfer into ones that are healthier. We use Environmental Working Group as the source for what's clean. So look and say, okay, I'm using one brand, and maybe that's not the cleanest. What's another option to level up as you start to run out of things, as opposed to I have to clear out my entire chest right now, which could be 60 products. That's a major project, as opposed to, oh, hey, my face lotion is running out. What's my next option? So I would say start slow, work with a functional medicine provider, and no, it absolutely can get better. No question.
Yeah, that's the good thing. Once you discover that it can get better and have so many wonderful health ramifications in really, really all aspects of your health. And that's great. And so in your book, I know you have steps that people can take. So what's the best way if someone is interested in this, they want to learn more, so they're reading your book, what's the best way to navigate it, or, the path, what's the best thing for people listening?
Yeah, so the book actually really takes, so it's Dirty Girl, and it takes you, and we named it because I said to my husband, I'm such a dirty girl. But the book really takes you through all the different possible ways in your life that you could be exposed to toxins, and chapter by chapter, how can you level up? So when we're talking about food, how do you level up? When we're talking about makeup, what do you do? Water, cleaning supplies, how do you take where you are? And so it really does go systematically. And in the end of every chapter, we have a top 3 to 5, we call them the hot picks. What are the top 3 to 5 things that you could do right now to make a difference? And the thing that I will say is lifestyle change does not happen overnight, and it doesn't become a habit overnight. And so you're going to screw things up, or you're going to go to a wedding and eat something that you know isn't quite what you should be eating, and it's okay. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is narrow that time that you're off the rails, instead of using that excursion to say, oh, well, forget it, I'm not going to be eating compliant ever, and then not going back on your program. Use that as an opportunity to say, okay, I'm definitely going to this event. I'm going to plan to have an excursion, and the next morning I'm going back on my program. And notice I don't say diet, because it's really not meant to be a temporary state. It's meant to be things that you can sustain. So people should go you can use the book to follow along, and it'll give you questionnaires to see how healthy you are and how your stress is, because that's really important too. So it gives you all the things that you need to walk through cleaning up your life.
So I know everyone's sitting here, that hot tips. So people sitting here, what would be maybe the 3 hot tips that you would tell everyone that maybe are easy to implement that they could do right away?
Okay, super easy. Don't be a stress ball. And what I mean by that is, if you're actively worrying about something, you're releasing hormones in a cascade in your body that shuts down detox. So worrying and anxiety is bad for your health. So the one hot tip around worry is convert your worry into actionable items. And what I mean by that is, I can't tell you how many times I hear the question, what if, and then fill in the blank, right? What if I lose my job? What if my boyfriend breaks up with me? What if I trip and fall? Whatever that is. And my response is, you're asking the wrong question. The question is not what if. The question is either what would I do if, or what do I need to do to prevent X? And those 2 questions, and it sort of differs depending on where you are, those questions give your brain access to action and power instead of victimization and lack of power. So that's one tip.
And I have to say something, you're talking music to my ears, because one of the things I do is teach a happiness program. And that's the very first step. The foundation is be a victor and not a victim, and look at solutions instead of problems. So I love what you said. And it's really, I've just seen how incredibly powerful that minor mindset changes. And I like the way you phrase it with the words. That's terrific, but so important. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's step 1, or one hot tip. And then another hot tip would be, get enough sleep, because your body and your brain release toxins when you're sleeping. And so if you don't get enough sleep, you don't have the opportunity to rejuvenate, and your body. Detoxification is a higher level behavior. And what I mean by that is, it's not survival. You can survive by putting toxins in your fat and your bones, and you'll be okay. To survive, you need to eat, you need to sleep, you need to be safe. It's like Maslow's hierarchy. So when you're doing detox, you want to focus on getting enough rest so that your body recognizes it's safe, it's okay to detox, it's time. And then the third I would say is, wherever possible, don't eat things from a package. And I recognize we live in the United States, or I live in you live in the United States too. We both live in the States, and it's very go, go, go. So it can be really difficult to plan ahead for food, but do your best and forgive yourself when you don't have an optimal day, and get right back on the path of, okay, tomorrow, here's how I'm going to plan it out so that X, Y, or Z doesn't happen, or X, Y, or Z does happen, whatever that outcome is. Those would be my top 3.
Okay. Those are great. And as you said, so powerful. So as you said, though, you're not, if someone's listening, and there are people who just want to do everything. And so
You're talking my language.
so your suggestion is not to go cold turkey and just.
Well, I think, so that's a great point, Margie. So I think that if you're listening, you need to understand how you personally make lifestyle change. So either you're someone who's incremental and you make a little change and then a little change and a little change, or you're someone who wipes the slate clean. First, decide who you are, and then figure out, do you need a coach, or can you do this on your own once you're on the right path? And that gives you 4 possible quadrants of who you are, the different, because you can mix and match those 2. And so there are people who are hardcore. I'm hardcore. I'm doing multiple detox protocols at the same time, along with it's huge and it's a pain in my butt. And it got me better faster. So it's sort of time versus energy versus urgency. So it's okay if you're someone who's hardcore. I'm hardcore. It's fine. But it sometimes gets tiring. It's a lot of work.
So it's interesting because how often do you see that this is done, that people are really evaluated for the toxins in, based in conventional medicine or just in general?
Yeah, so I think I would say conventional medicine is amazing for emergency care and for obstetrical care and surgical care. I think that there's some gaps around optimizing health and getting to the root cause of the issue. That's not the focus of conventional medicine. So when there's a crisis, like in Flint, Michigan, it's excellent for diagnosing crisis level issues. But it may not be as effective at saying, okay, now that we have this here, absolutely don't fill the pump with lead, but how do we get that lead out of those kids' bodies in a way that works for them and is safe and effective? So really what we're focusing on is how do we get to the root cause and get down to it?
So in terms of what people who are listening, are there things that we can just do on a daily, besides getting rid of toxins, are there things we can add to our day, or are there practices that just help us on it? You mentioned sleep and reducing stress. Are there any other daily practices to just help cleanse our body of the toxins, or is there anything else that you recommend?
Yeah, 100%. This is never popular. So I'll say up front, avoid alcohol because it distracts the liver. Your liver is one of your primary detox organs. So when you drink alcohol, it distracts the liver from its detox behavior and now focuses it on detoxing you from alcohol. So that's one critical behavior that I would say minimize or avoid entirely. I know that's not popular, but that's something that does make a huge difference for people. And then another would be to sweat regularly. And because our skin is our largest organ and we remove toxins from the skin, the more we can sweat, the better. And whenever I have patients who say to me, I never sweat, I'm like, that's not good. That means you're not detoxing. So nobody wants to be stinky, but it's a good thing because it means you're releasing toxins from your body. Okay. We talked about the not eating processed food. Sugar goes into that, which is also not so popular. Okay. And then other daily things would be to make sure the products that we're putting on our bodies are as clean as possible. And so to use ewg.org as a resource of, oh geez, I really want to level up on my body. You're putting body lotion all over your body. That would be something to focus on first.
And a lot of times it's just an easy swap. So there are a lot of things that aren't difficult at all. It's just swapping one product out for another and realizing how toxic some of the products are, which it's just so interesting. It's always shocking to me how people really don't pay that much. A lot of people, what I see, really, oh, big deal. It can't be that terrible. It really can't affect us. But you as a physician see it.
Yes. Well, it's amazing, Margie. I'm human too. So I grew up, my mom used Simple Green and told me when I was a kid, this is really a great cleaner and it's super clean. It's called Simple Green. And I have used Simple Green for years and years. And about 6 months ago, I woke up and I went, Simple Green is not clean. Simple Green has a ton of chemicals in it. But because I associated it with my childhood and it's what my mother used, I literally didn't even think about it. And so it's that type of unconscious stuff that is so meaningful because I went, oh, okay, sorry, Simple Green, I love you to pieces, but we're breaking up. And so it's even questioning the things you've used for years because those can be not the best. And that was an opportunity. So now that's gone. Now we have other stuff.
You really bring up a good point because it's called Simple Green. And so you think how to that it sounds like it's the most organic, most clean product. And I think there's so much deception oftentimes with a name that you have to go beyond. And I think that's such a good what you told everyone to go to the environmental working group and see what's really in the product and to really evaluate it, because so often, the package is going to say, and you can't go by that. You can't, do you want to talk about that? Like what they don't have to say in terms of the advertising?
Yeah, it's pretty horrifying, actually. So they don't have to say, if there's something proprietary in it that makes it what it is, they don't have to say what that is. So you'll often see, it'll just say natural flavors. Well, that's not for cleaning, obviously, but what's natural flavors? Like, what is it? You can't tell because it's proprietary. So I would look for words that you understand. There are some pretty straightforward, if we're talking about cleaning agents, vinegar is great, lemon is great, tea tree oil works. There's a lot of really, coconut works. There's a lot of really simple things that companies have put together that are clean and don't harm you and don't harm the world either. Because think of all these things we wash down the sewers are getting ultimately into the ocean. And so there's nothing in that chain that will be harmed by those products.
Are there any catchwords that we need to watch out for in terms of the products? Is there anything, like, I know with some of the fragrances
Yeah, that's too huge. I think even if something says all natural, it can have things in it that are
right, that doesn't really mean anything, all natural.
No. And my kids will always come home with things and say, can we eat this? And I'm like, huh. It says natural flavors, and then it says on the back, artificial flavors. So I would say anything for food that has artificial flavors or artificial colors, those are not in our favor. Those are not things that we want to eat. That would be the low-hanging fruit. The artificial sweeteners are things I would avoid. They disrupt the microbiome and are potentially cancer promoting, so we don't want to eat those. And preservatives oftentimes are really not in our favor. They're really in the company's favor because it allows their product to be sold for longer, but it's not in our favor. So I would look for things that don't have artificial preservatives in them too.
Oh, great. Yeah, this is just, it's so important. I think being a physician and seeing what this has done to your practice and how it's helped people, I think that helps convey how important this step is in terms of your overall health and just something else that needs to be addressed, because so often there's so many people that just don't understand. As you said, they can't figure out why they can't lose weight, or they're losing their hair, or they're, all sorts of things going on, and they don't realize there's more digging to be done. And
yeah, we haven't even talked about autoimmune disorders. So
yeah, why don't we talk about that?
Let's talk about that.
Let's just briefly hit on. I mean, we've discussed that on the podcast, but I would love to hear your perspective on that.
So there's been an explosion of autoimmune disorders, and the way we see it in our practice in functional medicine is that it's not so much that you have a disease, it's that you have a severe inflammatory state. And what your body's doing with that inflammation is turning it into something, which for a lot of people is Hashimoto's. I have celiac, which is an autoimmune disorder. There's rheumatoid arthritis, there's ulcerative colitis, there's a million, well, maybe not a million, but there's a lot. And so the goal for us is to help people identify, oh, I'm not my diagnosis. My diagnosis is my body telling me something. So it's very possible to heal autoimmune disease by looking at the root cause and dealing with the inflammation, the toxins, the imbalances. People get better.
Yeah. And especially it's such an issue with osteoporosis. I can't even tell you how many people have issues with what I see typically is gluten. And once they, it doesn't have to be celiac disease. And once they get off it, it's just shocking how, not only do their bones improve, but also arthritis, other inflammatory conditions as well.
Yeah, gluten is its own toxin, its own brand of toxin. And you bring up a really good point, Margie, because you don't have to have celiac is what happens when you've crossed the autoimmune line, but you can be both someone sensitive to gluten and have it cause the issues. The reason gluten celiac leads to osteoporosis is that it causes profound malabsorption. So you don't get your minerals and nutrients. But you can have that profound malabsorption before you have a diagnosis of celiac. And I call those celiacs in training. Those are people who they haven't had the autoimmune part, but they have the digestive and absorption issues. So absolutely gluten can cause osteoporosis, osteopenia, because it causes that disordered absorption. And you bring up a really good point around
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. And oftentimes people are not tested. They're only tested, like most people now with osteoporosis are tested for celiac disease because that is well known, but they're certainly not tested for the other, other types of gluten issues and so that's a real problem. Do you test in your practice then when people have osteoporosis? Or
So
everything, I guess, to test for. Yeah.
yeah, pretty much if you walk in the door and you're of Irish, Italian, Eastern European, well, if you pretty much live anywhere on the continent where you hail from, we test you for gluten sensitivity and possibly celiac. And we also look for what kind of porousness is in your gut and letting gluten through, because you can have gluten sensitivity without celiac. So celiac only tells me you've reached the autoimmune part, but it doesn't, those tests don't tell me if you have a gluten sensitivity. So we also take a lot of people off gluten because it's its own form of toxin.
Yeah, I absolutely, my husband, he was actually on the podcast, but he probably would have died had we not, honestly, had we not figured out he had such a bad autoimmune reaction to gluten. And so, yeah, it's quite powerful in terms of, and so it sounds like you also test for the leaky gut and other things in your testing, which is.
We test everything. So we're looking at your gut function, we're looking at your adrenal function, your nutrient status, we look at your toxins, we look at whether you have Lyme or any of the co-infections, we look at what are your risks of cancer, we test everything.
But that probably serves you well, because then you can figure, you have to figure out the root cause and then you can treat it.
Yeah, it's really, again, back to the knowledge is power and ignorance is bliss, because people who come to us are ready for the knowledge and the action so that they can take control. Because I think what we all want is to have some empowerment, inspiration and empowerment about the ability to take care of ourselves. And that's so great for people when they recognize, oh, I could actually alter how I feel every day.
Yeah. And I think the big thing about this is people just don't realize it. They don't even, they don't realize that this could be playing such a role in their health. And so let's talk more about the book. So in terms of people can use that book as a guide to get started.
I think it's a good jumping off point. And I don't think any person is an island. And so the book's, look, I love the book. We wrote the book. Awesome. It gives you lots of information and it's meant to be inspirational and give you empowerment and presented in a way that you can take in chunks if you feel overwhelmed. So that's great. And I would absolutely recommend that people work with a functional nutritionist so that they can get coaching on optimal ways to eat, get a consult with a functional medicine doctor so that they understand, is there anything else going on here to make sure we've really optimized you? And then put that together with the toxins so it doesn't exist in a vacuum. But they can absolutely use the book to start cleaning it up.
I love that, because you really, give guides, which is so important.
Yeah.
And so in terms of how people could follow you or stay in touch with you, what are the possibilities?
Lots of ways. So we're on everything. We're on Facebook, 5 Journeys. We're on Instagram, 5 Journeys Health. Our website is 5journeys.com. And have I missed one? Twitter is 5 Journeys.
And do you see people do you see people in your practice?
Oh yeah. So we have a thriving practice. We have 3 physicians and a nutritionist and a thriving IV practice. And so COVID's made it a little bit interesting because not everyone comes in, although as COVID starts to lift, we're seeing people more in the office, but we do both telemedicine and in person, depending on the various needs of the person.
Oh, and can people see you from all over, or do they have to live in Massachusetts or?
It's insurance dependent. So we have to go through that on a case by case basis.
Oh, great. So is there any other advice? You've given us so much great information, but is there anything else that you want to leave everybody with or that we missed that you feel you want to share?
I think it's always important to leave people with, you can do this. And it's going to feel a little bit overwhelming, and that's okay. Chunk it down until it doesn't feel overwhelming, because it's absolutely attainable. And again, it's not an overnight process, but it's possible to live a life in which you're not exposed to a bombardment of toxins every day.
And that's great advice. And this is wonderful. Thank you for creating this book and really giving us a tool to help us, as well as just all this information that you shared that really can help all of us have healthy, better lives. And I think also the dig deep part is so critical, not to just accept, oh, I'm losing my hair, I'm getting older, big deal.
Right.
Because as you said, there's so many reasons that these can be, the toxins can be playing a role.
Margie,
So
I have one other thing to offer the audience, which I
sure.
didn't tell you about. We offer anyone who listens to your podcast a free book. We just ask that they cover the shipping.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
I didn't mention that to you, and I just realized that. And so if you go to our website, fivejourneys.com/free book, that will allow you to sign into, well, you'll create an account and you'll get to just pay for the shipping, and then you'll get the book for free.
Oh, that's
Get started.
fantastic. So I'll have the link in the show notes as well. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for doing that. Fantastic. Very exciting. Okay, so we can all have our own little guidebook and to start
Mhm.
getting rid of our toxins and just up leveling our health, which we all want to do, because we who doesn't want to feel as good as they possibly can feel. So wow, thank you so much. That's
My
just great
pleasure.
for sharing that. And thanks for being here. And I look forward to staying in touch.
This is great, Margie. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Dr. Trubow and have a better understanding of why it's so important that we identify the toxins in our life, as well as to slowly get rid of them. Dr. Trubow so generously offered our community a free copy of her new book, Dirty Girl: Ditch the Toxins, Look Great, and Feel Freaking Amazing. Love the title. All you need to do is go to www.fivejourneys.com/free book. And I'll have that link, as well as all the links that Dr. Trubow gave, how to contact her, in the show notes. So thanks so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.